said that actions will be taken against the deputy governor to also serve as an example to other people who will endanger the lives of other Kenyans by putting their lives in danger in terms of infections with the coronavirus. So today is the day, but we don't know the kind of framework that has been put in place here at the courts, because what we understand from last week is that the manner of which the cases were conducted is that some were being conducted by judges through video links, and of course that is something that perhaps maybe we're also expecting to see happening during the case the similar case with the DG. But of course also we will be speaking to court officials and of course also the law enforcement officers to also understand how exactly this will be done. But we understand is that the court process will begin at around 9 o'clock. The DG spent the weekend at the police station. We are informed that he was taken to Port Police Station where he was taken into custody on Friday. So since Friday he's been in custody, in police custody, and we are expecting his arraignment today. And of course also we are following up on other areas with regards to the efforts by the law enforcement and the health authorities in terms of containing the spread of COVID-19. But of course also we'll be speaking to different stakeholders in health sectors and in several other sectors to understand the different efforts that they have been put in place so that they ensure that this particular virus is kept at bay. But of course what is also not worth noting is the fact that the social distancing and the several guidelines that have been put in place, especially where most people crowd, for example at the Likoni crossing channel, according to the authorities, the commuters have adhered to some of those regulations, and of course we will again be visiting those areas to just inspect and give an update on what is happening. But of course also remember the county government of Mombasa has begun the registration of persons. These are people who are yet to receive food in terms, they are yet to be given food by the county government. We are informed that the names are been taken in several areas, including Changamwe, Mikindani, and other areas within Kisauni, and these are people, vulnerable people, and they will be given priority when it comes to food distributions. This is something being done by the county government of Mombasa, and we saw on Saturday the Emergency Response Committee on COVID-19 inspected a godown where several food items had been stored, and what we are waiting for is now to be informed when this particular exercise will begin. We had the county governor Hassan Joho saying that this particular exercise is being conducted in order to cushion the vulnerable from suffering in case the coronavirus situation in the country worsens. Then if at all the government decides to lock down the country, then of course they'll use these food items to distribute, to feed the people within the region. Of course, remember Mombasa comes second in terms of the COVID-19 positive cases after Nairobi, and of course not only Mombasa, there's also Kwale and Kilifi counties which are among the coastal counties that have been affected by the virus, and we've seen several sectors take a hit due to this coronavirus. Hotels are closing down. Employees are being sent home because there are no more guests. There are no more tourists coming to the coast region. And remember this, the tourism sector is one of the key areas that boosts the economy of this region, not only the entire coast region, but of course also having to boost even the country's economy. But of course, I'm sure that the government has put in place several measures to ensure that they will be able to address these issues. And of course, also there's something that we bumped into this morning at Buxton area here in Mombasa, where we saw wholesale traders engaging the law of enforcement officers with the county's inspectorate department. We saw some of the traders forcing over 10 lorries carrying vegetables, forcing the way into Kongowea market. Remember, the county government had come up with a framework to decongest the market, and of course putting in place several measures like banning the sale of mitumba, and this we've seen has been met by defiance when it comes to the traders who are saying that they cannot comply with some of these directives in place because the county government came up with satellite markets, one of them in Tononoka and another one in Likoni, and even went ahead to waive some of the extra revenues that were remitted by these traders. But we're seeing that the traders are meeting these directives with a lot of defiance, demanding that they need to continue with what they have been doing at the Kongowea market. So we're also expecting the authorities to speak about this issue because we are seeing tens of them demonstrated this morning and even blocked traffic from the Buxton area, and police had to give them way, and we saw them making their way towards Kongowea through the Nyali Bridge. So as of now, we don't know what's happening in that particular region, but of course we'll be speaking to the law enforcement and of course other stakeholders within the market to also understand what are some of the key concerns that are being channeled. I mean, they're being aired by these traders. But of course, also remember, whatever that was being done there at the market is in the benefit. I mean, and it's in the a way of trying to contain the spread of the virus. And of course, also will be, I'm sure that the police bosses are already conversant of whatever is happening, the situation, the current situation there. And we even saw that some of the police officers try even to shoot in the air to disperse the traders, but that did not bear any fruit. But of course, also we are sure that they are currently in engagements. I mean, they're talking to find a solution to resolve whatever issue that is happening. But of course, also not forgetting that the health authorities are putting different measures and even a warning of instituting stiffer regulations so as to contain the spread of the virus. So we are on top of everything that is happening in the coast region, and make sure that you stay tuned to NTV. We will be giving you more information with regards to the efforts done by the government as far as the virus is concerned, and of course we'll be bringing you up to speed to other things that are happening across the coast region together with my colleagues. Back to you, Julians.
Many thanks. That's NTV's Kevin Mutai in Mombasa, focusing on a raft of issues, including the arraignment of Kilifi Deputy Governor, as well as efforts to try and decongest Kongowea market. We'll definitely be looking at some of those in our subsequent bulletins. From Mombasa, let's cross over to Kisumu, where my colleague Oko Kusa is on standby. Oko Kusa, what's happening in Kisumu this morning?
Well, Julian, of course, a similar situation, more or less like what Kevin is trying to explain there in Mombasa, is replicating itself here. A couple of the operators have adhered to the government directives of carrying 8 passengers, not more than that, for the 14-seater vans, and of course 15 for the 25-seater buses, and that is something that we are keenly following down here. We've seen a couple of them adhering to those directives. Some are yet to follow those directives by those guidelines by the government, and of course they have their reasons why. We have a couple of them here that are going to share with us what really is happening, why they feel that maybe some of these directives are too stringent for them to follow. Let's start with this gentleman here. Just tell us your name. Tueleze jina lako kwanza, alafu zile changamoto mnapitia.
Jina yangu ni Frederick Oyaro. Na changamoto ambazo tunapita kwa matatu ni polisi. Polisi wa Kakamega Road wanatuambia magari bebe excess iwapatie pesa yao. Sasa nauliza county commander wa Kisumu na wa Vihiga, Kama unatumia polisi kwa barabara kutunyanyasa, kuweka abiria wakae full 18 wapatiwe pesa, ama unataka watu wakae 8 na kwenda kutoa pesa. Hiyo ndio nauliza serikali kaunti ya Kisumu, polisi wa Kondele na kaunti Kisumu, kaunti ya Vihiga. Kwa sababu polisi wa Vihiga kila siku wananithreaten, nabeba watu 8 siwapeti pesa. Mpaka sasa wananithreaten kama sitatoa hiyo pesa yao watadili na mimi, nitajua wao ni nani. Ambapo wananiambia Kondele, wananiambia wa Vihiga, wananiambia kama sitatoa pesa yao watajua, nitajua au ni wakina nani. Sasa mimi naomba serikali, hakuna siku nimekosa baji kwa shingo yangu. Niko na baji yangu, niko na mask zangu ziko mingi, nimeweka tu stock. Sasa sina hizi mamas, hizi ni mamas, nimebaki kila kitu. Niko na baji yangu niko nayo. Sasa sina. Lakini kila siku polisi ananisumbua, nataka pesa nimpatie. Hii ni baji yangu niko nayo. Na hakuna siku nakosanga uniform mimi. Na vaa yote. Asubuhi hadi kwa Sunday nipata uniform mimi. Wananithreaten hadi nitajua wakina nani. Polisi wa Vihiga na wa Kisumu. Sasa naomba serikali, County Commission wa Kisumu na wa Vihiga, naomba kama mtu wa polisi kuchukua pesa kwa magari wabebe tu 18 vile wanabeba, kwa sababu magari ya Kakamega zinabeba excess 24 hours, zinabeba excess. Si uongo. Hata nataka tu mtu atoke tu hapa, fuate gari hapa sasa Kondele, afuate apande tu ndani ya gari na toe picha hata ya simu, ashike tu mpaka Vihiga, ataona kama i excess ama si excess. Zinabeba watu 18, si hata 14, 18. Sasa naomba tu serikali iangalie mambo ya Vihiga, hata kama inatuma tu magari ndogo ndogo itume, itafute ingiangalie mambo ya Vihiga, itoe traffic hapo, weka hata MP, ita understand, haitachukua pesa kwa magari. Watu nani na tuwezi. Sasa naomba tu hivyo. Asanteni.
Well, Julian, that is one of the operators here, very bitter, actually blaming the police for aiding, abetting of, flouting of the directives by the government. He's trying to explain there that they are experiencing pressure from the traffic police flying between Kisumu and Kakamega, who are demanding that they carry excess passengers so that they can all give them some bribe in terms of for them to allow those matatus to apply that route. So let's hear from another gentleman here again. Tueleze tu zile changamoto gani mnapitia pengine kuhakikisha ya kwamba hizi directives na government zinakuwa follow.
Mimi tuongea kiniaba yangu, upanda wa kubeba abiria kwa less chupesa nyambayo tunabeba naye ni kidogo. Abiria 8 kwa 6 kwa gari na dereva 7, conductor 8, beba na shilingi 50. Hakuna penye kazi gari iko na pesa. Hilo changamoto. Serikali ikatusaidia tubeba 14, haitupulizia dawa kwa gari. Ikakuwa at least na mtu afanye mask. Hiyo tu ndio niko nayo.
Okay. Well, those are some of the reactions here from Kisumu. Of course, we'll still be keeping our eye or just to find out that those directives and the guidelines given by the Transport Ministry and of course the Health CS sometimes back, if they are followed to the letter. Of course, as I mentioned there before, we've done a little spot check and it's like half complied, half are still yet to comply with those direct guidelines issued by the government as far as curbing the spread of coronavirus is concerned. So we'll be here in Kisumu just to keep our viewers updated with the ongoings. Back to you, Julius.
Many thanks, Oko Kusa. Quite a passionate plea from some of the transport operators there, and we'll definitely be following up that story across the counties to see what sort of pulse it is creating in the country. And you'll remember that on Wednesday, 25th March 2020, President Uhuru Kenyatta spelled out a raft of measures to try and cushion the ordinary mwananchi from the adverse effects of the spread of COVID-19. Now, last week, the National Treasury published the Tax Laws Amendment Bill of 2020, which includes this and also a raft of other measures. Now, to unpack this and to help us make sense of what exactly this means, I'm joined by Robert Wareru, who is the Associate Tax Director for Tax and Regulatory Services at KPMG. And this is something which we'll be delving into just to try and get a sense of it, to try and flesh out the details. What should we expect as ordinary citizens? What are some of the changes which are being contained in this document? And if it goes to the floor of the House and actually sails, what does this mean for us? So Robert is joining us via Zoom. Robert, good morning and pleased to have you here. Let's just begin by having the view that we did have a conversation around this last week. When you look at the Tax Law Amendment Bill, what are some of the key changes we should be anticipating?
Thank you very much, Julian. So, like you correctly said, last week, Monday, the government published the tax amendment laws bill, and some of the changes that we have seen, some of the key changes are the POIE bands have been expanded, and the 24,000 shilling lowest bracket has been put in place. That's a good one. Another one that we have seen is a significant change in the tax allowances that are available to companies, and that's something that needs to have a lot of people to go into details. And the reason why I'm saying that is because whereas companies, we have seen, we saw the president talking about a 25% corporation tax rate. Though it's not in the bill, we believe that is an omission that should be rectified when this is discussed. However, the reason why I bring in the tax allowances is because the government has reduced the corporation tax rate, but also taken away a significant amount of allowances. So that's something that will be up for debate. Another one that will possibly, catch a lot of people, by surprise is the huge changes in VAT. We've seen quite a number of things being removed from the VAT zero rated status to being taxable. And I'll give you an example. You're talking about bread. Bread previously was zero rated. Now it's going to be exempt. What that means is that the cost of inputs like electricity in baking that bread are not claimable, and therefore we expect that the price of bread will go up. The same thing with LPG, the cooking gas that we normally use. So there's quite a number of changes that we can see there, but key is that government has actually made good on its promise to expand the tax brackets for POIE. That's a big one.
And Robert, speaking about the subject of VAT, we saw the National Treasury Secretary exercise his powers under the VAT Act to scale it down from 16 to 14%. Now you're talking about some of the prices going up because, of course, of the VAT exemption versus VAT zero rating. Where does this leave us as ordinary citizens?
Well, Julius, that just means that some of these things become more expensive. Talk about the bread, like we're saying. So because the baker cannot claim the input VAT that they incur on electricity, for example, it means that you and I and anybody else who's buying bread will have to dig deeper into their pockets. So in as much as you're getting the tax break in terms of a lower tax on your POIE, you'll still have to dig in more. And an important one that we've also seen, two other important ones that we have seen are, one is VAT on medicaments. So previously that was zero rated, which means that manufacturers of medicines could claim input VAT. But now they have been proposed to move to exempt, again meaning these medicines will become a bit more expensive. And then earlier on in the show, I had somebody talking about the tourism sector. An interesting one is VAT on tourism is now at 14% tourism facilities, meaning that if you are to go into a game park, you'll have to pay 14% VAT on your ticket to enter. So it just means that as an ordinary Kenyan, you'll have to dig in more, despite the measures to cushion you as an individual from a POA perspective.
But Robert, to be fair to the government, we do understand, of course, there is the delicate balance between cushioning the mwananchi and trying to raise revenue to finance the government expenditure. We already saw the budget policy statement which was tabled before the National Assembly. Don't you think the government is really just trying to balance out and to be sure that even as it extends relief on one hand, it is at least figuring out how it will mobilize resources on the other?
Absolutely, I agree with you, because you've got to look at it from a fairness perspective. You're giving companies, you're giving individuals these tax breaks, but where do we expect government to raise these revenues? And we have to agree that government has to give some and take some. And in my view, part of the taking some is, for example, reducing the capital allowances. So I do agree with you that when we see VAT items being subjected more to VAT, is because government needs to bridge that financing gap. Otherwise, you cannot just give. Where are we going to finance this bailout package from? And by the way, Julia, one other thing that I wanted to highlight is that's because it's down from 3 to 1%. But the most interesting thing is that the traders now who have a turnover of up to 50 million will just pay 1% turnover tax. That's a big one. That's a really big boost for the small businesses.
I see. Good point you're raising on turnover tax, because of course the segment of SMEs has been a huge discussion from the time we talked about presumptive tax, which didn't work so well. Now we came to turnover tax. Do you see this working out for KRA? Okay, we can talk about the SMEs that it didn't work out for them, but what about KRA in this side?
Yeah, I think it will work out, because if you think about it, if you've got a turnover of say 50 million and you're paying tax at 1%, that's about 500,000. If you compare what you'd have paid on that, roughly about 15 million shillings, there's a big incentive to actually pay tax and avoid the Revenue Authority coming after you. However, my view is that once you start paying tax, then Revenue Authority has an idea that you exist and they'll expect you to continue paying tax. So this, to me, is a very good initiative, because you are encouraging Kenyans to continue paying tax.
I see. And Robert, I must ask you this question. Many of us are wondering, because we're already in the budget cycle, going to budget statement, which should be in sometime in June. Where does the Tax Laws Amendment Bill, leave the whole budget process and the budget laying out framework? Because, of course, there are the inhibitions in terms of the standing orders of Parliament as to what can be done going forward. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a very good point that you bring out. And one of the, if you listen to the debate that's going around, once this tax amendment bill is passed with the current provisions, then under the parliamentary standing orders, we cannot debate these issues again until at least 6 months pass. Now, you'll recall under the Public Finance Management Act, National Treasury is supposed to present the bill, the finance bill, to Parliament by 30th of April, and then by 30th of June, that must have been passed into law, which technically means you cannot change these changes that are included in this current bill, the tax amendment bill, cannot be discussed again in Parliament. But again, the other point that is important to note here is, given the substantive amendments that we can see in this bill, we expect that the finance bill will not have substantive changes, because this tax laws amendment bill covers income tax, it covers VAT, it covers excise duty, it covers miscellaneous fees and levies. It's very, very comprehensive.
I see. And Robert, there is the claim that this tax law amendment bill only caters for those in the formal economy. When you read the detail of it, because now finally we've seen it, do you feel that there's enough safety net for those who are in the informal segment of the economy?
No, in the informal sector, it's not really being catered for Julians, because you're talking about turnover tax. That's the only key thing that is affecting the informal sector. Possibly the only other one that would affect them is the lowering of the POIE tax band, so that up to 24,000 shillings you're not paying any tax. So that if you're in the informal sector and you needed to file your tax return, then you're not paying tax. Otherwise, I think it's more geared to the formal sector, and it's just because tax generally affects the formal sector. As a country, we still have a challenge in terms of taxing the informal sector. So it's difficult for you to look for provisions that target the informal sector. I do agree with you.
And just getting to the tail end, where does this bill leave the manufacturing sector? And why I'm asking about manufacturing is because typically it is the largest employer anyway. It takes in the large scale in terms of employment. So when we see some of the investment allowance deductions that we have seen in this bill, where do you think this leaves the manufacturing sector?
I think the manufacturing sector will have to really think about these proposals here, because you get a 25% corporation tax rate. However, your capital allowances are reduced, and an important one is the elimination of the electricity rebate that manufacturers used to enjoy. You recall that last year we brought in a 30% electricity rebate for manufacturers. So basically what that means is that these manufacturers, yes, they will continue investing, but they will not enjoy upfront capital allowances. Those capital allowances or deductions are spread over a longer period of time, which makes a lot of sense, because then government will actually collect corporation tax in the initial years as opposed to currently what is happening. So for manufacturers, I think it's time for them to prepare to pay corporation tax in the initial years of the investment.
And Robert, as my final question, the subject of VAT refunds was, of course, spoken about by the president. What's in this as far as the bill is concerned?
So the bill hasn't provided anything about VAT refunds, and that's not surprising, because that was really an administrative directive to Kenya Revenue Authority to process the VAT refunds. So what we do know from our discussions with Revenue Authority is that these guys are working even over the weekend to clear this backlog. So it's undoubtedly this will be paid sooner rather than later. Actually, we expect it to be paid around 15th of April, which is very, very good for businesses. So about 10 billion shillings should be paid around there.
And getting to my final question, Robert, when in the whole scheme of things, finally we have this tax laws amendment bill, of course, Kenyans are anticipating some cushion. How fast do you see this sailing through Parliament? Of course, we know parliamentarians are now under pressure to come and put this as a priority matter. How fast do you see this coming into force?
Julius, I'd be surprised if this is not signed into law by next week Friday. Well, Thursday, let's call it, Thursday, Friday, next week. So in about 2 weeks, I'd be surprised that if this is not signed into law by the president. It's got broad support, I think, by parliamentarians, and we expect it to go through without a challenge.
Okay. And that has been Robert Waruiru. He's an associate director at KPMG, focusing on tax and regulatory services. Thank you so much for your time and for your patience. He has been helping us unpack the Tax Laws Amendment Bill, which delves into the subject of the raft of proposals which President Uhuru Kenyatta fleshed out on Wednesday, 25th March 2020. And that is the whole idea of trying to cushion the ordinary mwananchi from some of the pressures we are now facing, because many are being sent on unpaid leave, many are being laid off because the business environment is definitely slowing down. And of course, revenues are taking a hit. So the president came up with a raft of measures, including an 100% tax relief for any Kenyans in the formal sector earning 24,000 shillings and below. So definitely that is quite a relief for some of them. But he's pointing out that there's a challenge, because as much as the VAT has been reduced from 16 to 14%, I should caution that this still has to go to Parliament, the number of VAT exempt products have now reduced, and therefore that is a challenge. Now, Kennedy Mureithi, my colleague, is standing by in the streets of Nairobi. You'll remember there's been the subject of whether we need to go on a lockdown or not. Kennedy Mureithi, what's the pulse on the street, and what are you hearing from Kenyans on that side?
Well, a very good morning to you, Julians, there in studio. Quite a chilly morning here in the capital, as the number of people who are coming into work this morning is not so much as it was before the curfew was imposed, and many people are actually working from home. Then even the traffic situation has actually improved so much. Most of us, it has taken less than 15 minutes to get to the capital. But here in the capital, Julius, then there is that particular call by some leaders that it is time that the capital was locked. Actually, even the newspapers, according to an Infotrack poll, is saying that 68% of Kenyans now want Nairobi or even the whole of the country locked so that they can be able to contain this particular disease. There are those who are of the opinion that even other parts of the world had to be locked down so that this particular disease can be contained. Yesterday, we were at that press conference where the CAS Chief Administrative Secretary for Health, Dr. Mercy Mwangangi, was giving a press conference, and she said that the number of people that had been infected had risen by 16 people yesterday, bringing the number to 142. Now, the biggest worry for the government right now is the community infections that are really Now, what they're saying is that the community transmissions are something that they are really worrying about, and the numbers are actually increasing because of that. And one of the things that is now being watched is who has this particular disease.
We certainly do apologize for the signal quality coming from Kennedy Mureithi. We'll be keeping tabs with him just to get an update from what's happening in terms of the streets of Nairobi. We cross over to Voi, where my colleague Bill Otieno is on standby. Bill Otieno, what's the latest from Voi Town?
Well, thank you very much, Julians, and I am joining the broadcast from Voi, and indeed been following up on the roadblocks set up by the county response emergency team here in Taita Taveta. And indeed, it's 4 days since the operation started, and we have at least 21,000 people who have been screened since the operation started. And the roadblocks are set in Njokini, Miaseni, and Manyani area in this county. Also, we have in Manyani, we have at least 9,900 people who are screened since on Friday to this date, or to last night. And in Miaseni, we have at least 12,000 people who are also screened since on Friday. We also have at least 1,200 people who were screened at Tanjukini area. If you can see these numbers, it means that there are so many people who are coming from Mombasa, and also people who are coming from Mombasa. People who are coming from Mombasa are many than people who come from Nairobi.
The county government is also urging the national government to give them what we call masks. And as the county governor of this county, Granton Samboja, earlier said that the county does not have what we call ICU. These are things that I am following up for now, and we'll be trying to give you some updates as we have developments from this side of the country. Back to you.
Many thanks, Bill Otieno, for that update from Voi Town. And now let's come back to Nairobi, where Kennedy Mureithi was giving us an update as to what's happening in the streets, some of the expectations that Kenyans have. Kennedy, we can now get you live and clear. Please just speak up from where you left in terms of what's happening in the streets of Nairobi.
Well, Julian, sorry for that hitch. And just as we were saying, it's a chilly morning here in Nairobi, and there is that perception that the number of people who are even coming to town at this particular time is not as much as it was there before, as most people are now embracing that point of call from the government that they should be working from home. And it has been a clarion call that has even permeated not just in other sectors but also in our newsrooms, as most people are now embracing that fact. People are even working and actually producing something from where they are, and this is now reducing the number of people that are coming into town. But even with this reduction of people that are coming into town and most places where they do work, there is that 68% of Kenyans, according to an InfoTrack poll, that is now calling on the government to lock down all systems and make sure that everybody works from home. But then, Julian, that question that really begs, are we ready for a complete lockdown? That question has actually been asked so much, and have Kenyans actually planned enough for this lockdown if it really does happen? I know most people, just like you, Julians, have been calling, even myself, when they are trying to ask themselves, when is this lockdown really coming? Now, it is Kenyans who are asking for, but every time that we've gone to the Ministry of Health, the question has always begged, you people are asking for a lockdown, but have you been able to follow the guidelines that we put in place at this particular time? There is a curfew that has been put in from 7 o'clock in the evening, and during the day when people are going to their specific works, the call has been to social distance. So the question has always been, are we really following these guidelines? We've been receiving reports of some parts of this country where people are waiting for police officers to come and chase them from town or from where they are, and this is past 7 o'clock, and they're looking at it as a cat and mouse game. So if this lockdown is really put in place, is it something that is going to help, or are people still going to go into this? Then there's the other question of whether the government has planned enough for this lockdown. We saw yesterday in Mombasa, the governor there were pamphlets whereby the governor was calling on well-wishers to come and even donate food in the event of a lockdown. Is the government prepared? Is the Council of Governors prepared for this particular eventuality? Is the chairperson of the Agriculture Committee looking into this? Is the government going to give people food when they are at home? Because these are some of the questions that are begging in the event of a lockdown. But yesterday, when we were finished with our press conference at the Ministry of Health, there was that call by the Speaker of Nairobi County, that is Beatrice Elachi, who even asked that it is time that we locked down Nairobi so that Kenyans are able to sit back at home and we are able to contain the numbers. So far, Nairobi ranks as the highest number of, with the county with the highest number of people who have been infected. Yesterday alone, 12 new people were announced to have been infected by coronavirus. So let us listen to what her views were with regards to this call to close down Nairobi.
I support the lockdown because, if we are able to lock down and see how the numbers can stagnate at one point, it will help Kenya. We know very well it is us, the middle class, who take those planes to go out of the country. And therefore, it is time for us to take responsibility that we are privileged. We normally go out of the country. We are the ones who have brought in COVID. Let us not blame anyone of Mathare. Let us not blame anyone of Kibera. But we are the ones who are going to give Kibera. Why? When your house girl comes, she's supposed to wash your clothes. She's supposed to clean your shoes. She's supposed to take care of your house. If you indeed have COVID, you have given her. And that is how we are going to do what? Find ourselves, ensure, and it will be the worst to have COVID spread in our congested areas. So I want to plead with the middle class. This is a disease. If we ask God, it is us who has brought it in this country. It is us. And therefore we must take that responsibility. We are wearing gloves. Can we start also the disposal of those gloves is very critical. I've realized when you go somewhere, you find people are just throwing them on the roads. It is wrong. Let us dispose them also in the right way so that we also protect the environment.
Well, that is a worry that came from the Speaker of Nairobi, and there is this feeling that if these people come to work for you at home and they do contract this disease and it is taken to the slums that we have in the country, we are looking at a disaster. And this is something that she was really citing when she was calling on closure of Nairobi. Then there was that other push by some governors who are saying that don't close the whole country, close a few of the main towns here in Nairobi. There was reference to Nairobi, there was reference to Mombasa, there was reference to Kisumu. But all this, we would like to see how it unfolds this week, whether the government is actually going to heed to calls of that 68 or even it was just something. You know, also there is that question of the sample, and also most Kenyans would also want to know what it feels. Also, this is also another week that we enter into where members of parliament are trooping into parliament just to get their status known about coronavirus. This Wednesday, we expect that Parliament will be coming up to discuss some of the proposals by President Uhuru Kenyatta, and there has been an ongoing exercise that started last week whereby members of Parliament have been going there to test for coronavirus. Almost it is being reported that 50, this is including members of the National Assembly and members of the Senate, have already gone there to be tested, and some of them whom we spoke to yesterday were saying that this morning they will be going there to know their status. So this coronavirus is not something that Kenyans want to joke with. And also this calls for them to lock down some parts of the country is just a push by a section of leaders and also a section of Nairobians. So it is quite something that we'll be looking into, and also we will not be allowed to know the results of these members of parliament so that it does not send so much panic into the country, but we would want to know what follows next. So this is a conversation that is starting, Julians, and also that question on whether you as a Kenyan are really prepared for this lockdown, or we will also see some panic shopping from what we saw when the first case of coronavirus was reported in the country. What will be happening? These are questions that we'll be asking here and also on NTV to know whether we are really ready, or do we really know what we are asking for when it comes to a lockdown. Back to you, Julians, in studio.
Many thanks, Kennedy. Of course, there's a divided opinion as to this whole subject of a lockdown and whether we are economically prepared for it, given the number of Kenyans who are actually working in the informal sector and they would need some safety nets. But thank you for that update. We'll be keeping tabs on that just to get an update from you much later on. Martin Mora is in Murang'a County. And Martin Mora, what are you focusing on this morning, especially in light of the situation that the country is facing with COVID-19?
Yes, good morning, Julian. It's a bright Monday morning here from County 021. And yes, the issues that we are following up concerning the COVID-19 disease is that you remember the government gave a directive, some directives that should be adhered to by residents by Kenyans. But it seems like some of them are not strictly following the regulations that were set aside, including presidential directives like closing of bars and even the curfew. Now, yesterday evening at around 8, the police here in Murang'a County, that is the Murang'a East here, managed to arrest 14 people yesterday at around 8. They were drinking at a local joint here in Murang'a town. In the morning, they had also managed to arrest another group, another 5, including the bar owner, who are drinking as they locked themselves inside. That was in Kiangage. This shows that, as the CS said, some people are not taking this directive so seriously, and that is why we are seeing the increase in the number of positive cases that are being reported. Something else that even the residents themselves are complaining about is not only the bars, but also the wine and spirit sellers. It is said that last week on Friday, another group of 14 people were also arrested inside a wine and spirit. You know, the government has allowed wine and spirits just to sell takeaways only. But some of them, some of these business people are becoming crafty, and they are actually opening the backyards where they are encouraging people to come sit down and have a drink, which is actually not allowed because the social distancing, mind you, that even the gathering, we're finding that in a club, and some of these people, when people drink, actually the people throw caution to the wind. So you're seeing these cases are here, they're in Murang'a, and they're on the increase. I remember the county commissioner Murang'a, Mr. Mohamed Bare, actually told us when this curfew started, all the residents actually followed to the letter. But some of these people who are actually becoming a nuisance to the administration, these are the bar owners, some, not all the bar owners, but some of the bar owners, and wine and spirit sellers. Now they're saying that they have so far arrested 30 people, and all of these people have been released on police bond because, as you know, they are not supposed to be inside the police station because of the spacing and considering the social distancing. The police are saying that once the court resumes, these people will have to face justice. And something else that they're saying the police are actually requesting is, they're requesting the courts, if it is possible, just to be opening a court that will be dealing with such cases, because they are saying at the end of the day they'll have so many backlogs, they'll have backlog of cases, and some of these are petty offenses that justice can be dispensed easily and very fast. So even the police are saying that every day it is becoming tiresome to them, because they are arresting people, coming here, booking them on the OB, and then releasing them, waiting for a later date that they will appear in court. Something else that we are following up on is the war against the COVID-19. Murang'a residents are still with it, and today we understand that some of the leaders, we have people have always complained, these leaders, their silence is loud enough to be heard from here to heaven. Some of them now, they are actually coming out trying to help the poor residents, or the needy, if I may call them the needy, by issuing sanitizers, soaps, and also foodstuff to eat. As this, some people, their jobs have been affected, and there's no businesses have been low, so some people cannot even afford, even others where they are going, some of the businesses have been closed. So the government or the leaders are coming together to see to try and ease the burden of these needy residents here in Murang'a County. Those are some of the few things that we are following up on. And on our subsequent, later on NTV, Sasa, we'll be seeking to speak to residents, because the matter that we are discussing at hand is the lack of seriousness among the residents. And as I have said, we have seen that now it's 4 bars that have been, their licenses have been revoked. The county government said anybody who will be arrested, who will be found contravening the directive by the president, will have their license revoked. So these are some of the things that are showing us that some of these people are not serious when it comes to the fight in the fight against the COVID-19. We'll be talking to some of the residents later in our NTV Sasa, just to give us their views. Back to you, Julians.
Right, many thanks, Martin Mora there in Murang'a, and he has said that when people drink, they throw caution to the wind. And that takes us to the close of the NTV News updates this morning. We have been covering matters COVID-19 and tax law amendment bill, and how this is likely to impact your pocket as a household, as a business, as a consumer. So definitely this is something you want to keep an eye on, just to see how it unfolds going forward. I have been your host, Julian Saboko. It's been a delight. NTV Sasa will be up much later on, but do stay tuned to NTV for the rest of your viewing.
This is NTV. I help women find independence by training them in fish farming. It's tough on my back, joints, and can cause headaches. Panadol Extra relieves multiple types of pain.
If symptoms persist, seek medical advice.
Basic protective measures as guided by the World Health Organization. Clean hands frequently with soap and clean water. Cover nose and mouth when coughing and sneezing with a tissue or flexed elbow. Avoid close contact 1 meter or 3 feet with anyone with cold or flu-like symptoms. If you have fever, cough and difficulty breathing, seek medical care early. Avoid raw or uncooked animal products. Help the world put an end to the spread of respiratory diseases by sharing this message with a friend.